Well, hi, here I am, the time traveler, still really working on how I want to arrange this channel and, struggling with myself as far as my willingness to work, I suppose. That's probably the best description of the matter. But I waffle back and forth, but I just really think it's such a very important topic to talk about at this particular time in the world. As I've said, we have we have all names for it. I like the best one from the American Society on Aging, which is the longevity revolution. But it's not just buzzwords. It's really what I'm talking about is looking at it from my own perspective as a person who's undergoing the process, shall we say, the process of aging in the New World Order, where longevity is a matter to be dealt with. The consequences of longevity is a matter to be dealt with on many different levels. I've already talked about a lot. I'm sort of looking at it one by one at this point, but the first thing to understand is that aging is a natural process. We age. Every organism has some life cycle. And, we are participants in that. Humans do a lot to modify whatever, but the reality is still we have, shall we say, biological underpinnings that go back, into the dark ages of the species, whatever. It's really interesting. Not that I know a lot about it, but just even skirting the surface of the topic in terms of the unfolding of the hormones and the effect on the next developmental stage as we go through the life cycle, especially as we are stimulated by nature into reproduction, which is the whole point as far as nature is concerned. But the issue that we have, so again, the point is that aging is a natural process. What is different now is that we have extended that period of aging for many people. Now, people can look at you can look at all the life, expectancies and at various times. Basically, it seemed like to me the largest cause of death was infectious disease and unsanitary conditions for a really long time, and huge infant mortality, huge. Kids, if they kids just did not get out of childhood. It was tough. So we've now gotten to the point where we can keep ourselves going for a much longer time than was ever possible for the vast number of people that we're talking about. Okay, so we know it's natural, but now we know we're going to be doing it for much longer than we expected. So what are the issues that emerge as we age in terms of, I'm looking at first, keeping it on the road, the function of the body. That is a really important thing. And, as much as intellectuals want to deny it, it's connected to the function of the brain, if only in terms of circulation and oxygenation. So, just on a mechanical level. So, now we know that we're going to have this quality vehicle, and we're going to for the very many of us are ready or are going to be more and more trying to keep that high mileage vehicle on the road. So to me, I look at it first from what they're calling functional longevity. What is it that you need to keep yourself going in the best possible level of function as you age? What are the obstacles to that objective? Are there things that we can do to overcome or modify? I'm not saying, the other part that's always really important to remember is you can do all the right things and still, things happen. Okay, so nothing makes you bulletproof. So there has to be kind of an inherent, as far, I think of it as inherent humility. In other words, you're going forward, you're assessing your situation, you're trying to do those things that are most helpful, and then you try to do it. So whatever happens, at least you gave it a shot. Let's put it that way. You know, you at least have a chance to decide to give it a shot, and with the goal, I think, of, you know, what we're calling functional longevity, which has to do with all the things that are necessary to maintain, you know, the various activities of daily life. You know, you may or may not be able to drive a car, but then what would be the resource? You know, some would want to look at what are the resources in the community that are available, blah, blah, you know, but I don't want to go too far forward. There's a lot more before we get to that. What I'm looking at now is just the basic vehicle. So it's really interesting when you look at, you know, humans, I think humans, we tend to think of ourselves as somehow apart from the natural order and, you know, whatever, and stick our nose up at, you know, species identification. But, you know, I think it's something like, you know, we have about 98% of the same genes with chimps, you know what I'm saying? Now, you know, you can look it up, but this is something that I think I encountered, you know, so most of our genetic gifts, shall we say, is in common to the great extent with chimps. So that's just sort of, again, another reminder of humility as we go forward. But we do have the option to learn. Okay, so one of the major issues in terms of maintaining functional longevity, if we see that as a goal, is to maintain muscle mass, because muscle mass is, you know, what helps. You have like this bag of bones inside of skin, and it's the muscles and ligaments and tendons that keep this all together. You've seen a lot of people have seen like skeletons, you know, hanging in a medical office or whatever, you know. So you need things on top of that to make it work. And what keeps it all, that marionette, working is the musculature, you know, the whole. So, and that is only part of it, because of course the whole core of the body is also a digestive system, diaphragm, heart. We're all talking about muscle everywhere, all right? So one of the things we know is that this is sort of rough, but it's not that far off base, okay? First of all, just to let you know, we start losing collagen from our face in our 20s, because as far as the species are concerned, we've already mated and procreated a few times, and so cool. So again, to look at the timeline of, you know, that we are working with, that in other words, many of the milestones that are now being postponed into to early middle age took place a lot earlier in the lifespan of the Homo sapien, or, you know, some of our relatives as we went forward. It's because people didn't make it. I mean, they were always long-lived people, and there were always a huge infant mortality rate. But, you know, for the most part, you know, I'm thinking of a, you know, sort of, you know, a primitive male person lived to 35 to 40, some did get older, but that was not too many. So now we have another situation altogether. We have all these people. And what we know is that we also lose muscle mass. Again, aging is natural. It's not, you're not fighting aging. What you're studying aging and see what was helpful in your aging process, and what is it that you're willing to do, and what is your goal also. You know, that's another whole other story. But I think it's to the advantage of everyone involved to heavily consider functional longevity as a goal, okay? So now, one of the big issues, again, you know, part of the aging process, you lose collagen because you've already reproduced, who cares what you look like? again, we're talking Mother Nature, we're not talking Elizabeth Arden here, you see. So by the time you're in your late 30s, early 40s, your offspring are of reproductive age, and you've become a waste of protein, and it's reflected. That's what's so kind of beautiful about it in a certain way. It's reflected in our physiology because we start losing muscle mass in our 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. Each decade takes its toll. And of course, that is where you get the stereotype of the frail elderly as an outcome, as a natural outcome of aging. Probably it's true. I don't know. I come from grandparents that worked their whole lives physically. So when they were in their, toward the end, they were still functioning physically because they had enough muscle mass from all their years of work so that they didn't have a major issue with sarcopenia. They had other issues, okay, but their mobility was there. But they lived into their late 80s and early 90s without thinking on what they had accrued through years of physical labor, okay? But now we're not doing that anymore. So we are doing little to offset that natural process of loss of muscle mass. The loss of muscle mass, you can look it up. I'm not a doctor. I'm just doing this as a regular person who's trying to figure it out for herself, quite honestly. You start losing, so there's something that it doesn't matter if you make it to your early 50s or early 60s, even 70, whatever. But if you're going to be living another 20 years, which is now a growing phenomenon, then there's something substantive that would be useful to do to help put nothing is magic, nothing, but this is something that you could put in your arsenal, shall we say, something that to work on that is helpful under any circumstances. Maintaining it, again, you're not gonna be 20 again, whatever. It's like working your maintaining muscle mass, possibly increasing it, without hormones or any other additives, so to speak. But the idea of trying to do what we can to at least push back against that natural loss of muscle mass, because we're going to have to ride this chassis longer than expected. Bottom line, this is because we're going to be high mileage. If you have a shot at being high mileage, being able to walk reasonably and go through your daily activities, or being frail, in danger of osteoporosis, all of the other things that have come with frailty, you might consider, just put it that way, giving that thought that we do have an option of changing our behavior to counteract one of the most pervasive or consequential, in a way, natural aspects of aging. Well, I think that's enough for right now. I'll talk about more, this topic is something of great interest to me. So this is The Time Traveler. I'm interested, I'm working my way up into trying to figure out how to make this channel work, or whether I'm willing to even work on it. But it'd be interesting to see if there's any responses, what people are dealing with in their own everyday lives, because it is a journey. And anything that we could do to be helpful to each other is not such a bad idea. So thanks a lot. Have fun.